Thanks, Wes. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the South Australian Online Member Event, The State of the Industry. My name is Julia Robinson and I am the Membership Executive here in South Australia. I begin today by acknowledging the Kaurna people, traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. I'd like to welcome you to the panel today. Wes Lambert, Restaurant and Catering CEO, Hugo Robinson, Head of Policy and Government, South Australian Associate Member Michael Kay is partner from Wallmans Lawyers. We're just waiting on Ricky Chow to come through. He's the Director of Brand Your Own and Taste Studios. And at the end of the session, we'll be available for questions and answers. So now we can go straight to Wes to provide us with an update on the state in the industry. Thanks, Wes.
Thanks, Julia. And definitely appreciate your introduction. And so, Julia, were you going to do a welcome to country, an acknowledgement of country?
I did it.
Oh, yes. Happy days. So sorry. I was listening for other things. So thank you so much. So I'm Wes Lambert, CEO of Restaurant and Catering Australia. And Julia, you okay? You're still not off. Yeah, you're happy to go on mute if you want to, if you have.
No, that's fine.
Okay, happy days. So Wes Lambert, CEO of Restaurant and Catering Australia, and just here to provide you an update of what's going on. So for all practical purposes, we are through COVID. We are on the other side. Hopefully we will not see any further outbreaks that affect South Australia. Hopefully there will be no more lockdowns. There'll be no more border closures. There will be no more COVID affected restrictions to your business. Now, no one can say that masks won't be back. That is the cheapest form of COVID prevention that the government can use. So there is a chance that masks may come back into the picture over the winter, but ultimately we're going to do everything we can to keep any restrictions to you to a minimum. As you know, the close contact rules around the country, including South Australia, are gone or are going, which is amazing because close contact of hospitality workers was a huge problem as a part of the overall workforce shortage problem. So we're going to be talking today about many things that we're fighting for. And one of those things is that workforce shortage. So ultimately, it's broken down into the training and education elements of Australians and people who are here to get into the hospitality industry because we've lost so many people to other industries or that left and went offshore. And also figuring out ways to get people to come back to Australia. So for many of you, you might think that it's actually the government slowing things down. It isn't. There are just over 200, that's all, cooks and chefs who have applied for visas offshore to come to work in Australia. So the approval of skilled workers in hospitality that want to come to Australia is quite small. And a lot of that is due to, those migration issues related to people leaving during COVID because they couldn't access any of the funding until the second or even third rounds. So we're going to be working very closely with the federal government on solutions to get people back into the country, like subsidized flights, like working through the restaurant premium dining labor agreement, which many of you may have heard that only for the first time. It's an agreement that replaces the fine dining labor agreement, and it's a new great tool if your business does more than $2 million and isn't a franchise to get people into your business a bit more quickly, and it covers many more jobs. But it's going to take all of us as the hospitality industry to solve this problem. As you know, or you may not know, but may find out in the coming minutes or hours, the RBA has lifted interest rates 0.25%, and we expect that that's going to go up consistently every month or every quarter to the end of 2023. And so this is certainly going to have an effect on your business as consumer confidence and consumer spending is likely to go down. Hugo sent me a recent survey today saying that 54% of 1,000 respondents said the first thing that they would cut if their mortgage payments went up was dining out. And so we've just come through COVID and we've had a very tough time. And there certainly is lots more room to go in many pockets, including the CBD and touristy areas like Adelaide and the Barossa Valley and Clare Valley and so many other places in South Australia. But ultimately, we are going to have some headwinds in relation to spending because not only are people going to feel a little bit more hesitant if their mortgage goes up, but also just menu prices have increased quite a bit. And if you haven't raised your menu prices, you need to, because we do know that those underlying costs those cost pressures are coming. For example, any restaurant, cafe, caterer that has a lease that is X% plus CPI, set 5-10 years ago, you might have thought then, or your attorney or lawyer or accountant might have thought then, oh, it won't be more than 1 or 2%. Well, it's 5 now, 5.1%, and there's a good chance that it might be 6 or 7 by 1 July, which means that for many people, their lease will go up 6, 7, 8, 9% in fiscal 23. On the back of that, we also believe that the minimum wage review committee may raise the minimum award rate by 3 to 5% because of this inflation. Well, immediately you're already up 11, 12, 13% in costs, and you haven't even started the beginning of the year. So it's very, very important that you are looking at your menus and anytime you get price increases to pass those on. But there are some great things. We've had lots more tourists coming into the country, and certainly domestic tourism is at all-time levels. The airports are very busy, and certainly the wait times, which we complain about, means that there's more people that are coming to South Australia and will dine in your businesses. Look, there are lots of future opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities in the technology space of hospitality to streamline your businesses and make them more efficient, and certainly to increase your revenue. So that is my patch of what's going on in the hospitality industry. And now I'm going to pass over to Hugo Robinson, Head of Policy and Government. And before I pass over, if you have any questions, please don't put them in the chat. Please put them in the Q&A. That way, as we answer them, we can either type answers if it's just for your business, or if it's a statewide relevant question, we can answer it. The right person can answer. Over to you, Hugo.
Thank you, Wes.
Hugo, sorry, just before you start, I'll just introduce Ricky. Ricky Chow. He's the director of Brand Your Own and Taste Studios. He's a South Australian associate sponsor, so he'll be coming in to have a chat about his product and also just some brief information regarding the consumer trends, Eastern Seaboard versus South Australia. So Ricky will come on and have a chat just after Hugo. Thanks, Hugo.
No worries. Thank you, and hello, Ricky. Well, g'day everybody. Hugo Robinson here, Head of Policy and Government at Restaurant and Catering Australia. No, I'm not coming from a condo in the mountains. This is just a visual background to hide the fact that I'm in a boring white wall office. But hello, and it's a great pleasure to talk to you all today. So my section's sort of more the political side and more the policy side, and Wes has obviously touched a bit of that in his opening remarks. But the first thing I want to talk about, obviously, is the big one. Well, there's two big ones, obviously. There's March's South Australian state election, where we saw the Labor Party defeat Stephen Marshall's Liberal Party. So we do have a new Premier, and I think it's safe to say that our organisation is already making headroads in terms of making a great relationship with him and his team. I know that we've already reached out to the Minister for Small and Family Business, Andrea Michaels, and we have meetings very, very soon with her and her team to discuss a range of different issues. But we're not too concerned with the change of government. Obviously, there were quite a few issues that brought about the changing of the state government, obviously to do with hospitals and the ramping issues. And a lot of anger from the hospitality industry in regards to the level or lack of support coming from the government during COVID. I know that border openings was also a massive issue, and sort of what that meant for the hospitality industry going forward, and especially masks. I was getting calls all the time from hospitality venue operators asking about when these masks were going to be over, and questions about, what can I do about irate staff? I've got staff who are 16, they're being abused by people coming in. And, while we never want any sort of worker to cop a serve from a staff, from a member of the public, the last thing we want is for hospitality venues to be pushed to the brink of either staying closed because they're copping so much abuse, or to the point where they have to start putting security guards on. That's not what we're about. We're about safe and enjoyable places and low risk venues to enjoy food and beverage. So, look, I think touching on that, I would say that our relationship with the new Premier is pretty good. I think the relationship with the team is pretty good. We still have great relationship with the relevant departments that will carry on, and I don't think that we'll see too much upheaval. I think that what we can do, and I think that, I think we can do it better than the other industry associations in hospitality, is really show the good side of restaurants, cafes, and caterers, and what we offer, and sort of our benefit to having a strong and thriving one, industry in South Australia. And I think they recognise that. I mean, you look at the level of grants that the South Australian government's already trying to pull out, and I mean, the new South Australian government, I mean, we already have the Adelaide shopfront and street grants that have gone out already. And I think that's a really good sign that, the level of support for hospitality is there. It's just about people like Wes and myself and Julia going to them and saying, we want to direct you in this way instead. I think that the groundwork is there. And so that really comes down to what we're fighting for. And what we're fighting for, as Wes said, was obviously solving the staffing crisis that we have at the moment in two ways, which is to try and cut as much red tape when it comes to training and education, getting Aussies into that training and education stream, making it affordable and cheaper for them to do it, and actually using our collective ability to talk to these new trainees and apprenticeships to keep them in the roles. Really, I think the name of the game going forward is twofold. It is not only getting Aussies into work and keeping them there by mentorship or making a valuable, long-lasting and worthwhile career, but it's also the immigration side of things. And we've made a lot of moves in terms of dealing with the current federal government, and especially the Minister for Immigration, Alex Hawke, in making it a lot easier to bring people into this country and make sure that there's actually incentives for them to stay, whether that be, pathways for permanent residency and such. And, we've been working very closely with both the minister and the department to work out new labour agreements that would make things a lot easier, especially if you're in the premium dining space. But also talking about getting hospitality in that critical staffing list, which we've done. And, our relationship with them is pretty good. So I think that I'll just cap it off then by then talking about what happens next with the May 21 federal election. We've got 3 weeks until the federal election, and things are pretty intense. I know South Australia's got a very, very interesting mix in the fact that you guys technically only really have one marginal seat, and the rest are really all up for grabs. And the marginal seat obviously is the seat of Boothby, which is the seat of the retiring Nicole Flint. And then the other hodgepodge mix that you have is your fierce battle for the Senate. I know Nick Xenophon's attempting to make a comeback, and we'll see if that works out. But you've also got the likes of Rex Patrick and Rebecca Sharkey in the lower house. So you South Australians have a very independent and rebel streak, it seems, which is something I do like about you all. But I think in terms of the federal government and the election, we, as any advocacy group and any sort of industry group does have, we have a great relationship with these guys. I can't stress it enough, and I sound like a broken record because I've said that a million times today. But we do. And, we're looking to try and get the best outcome, not only for sort of the way immigration works in this country, because that's obviously the big one that the federal government handles, but also in terms of award changes and IR changes. From the Liberal government, I think if they were to return in a majority or even maybe a minority working with independents, what we'd probably see is a continuation of what we've already seen. We'd probably see an ability for them to perhaps change the immigration cap off the back of the budget's lack of change if we worked a bit harder on it, and I think we will. We have to, for the sake of the industry. When it comes to Labor, they've run a very, what they call small target approach to this election. We don't know fully what they're planning to do, but we have seen some dribs and drabs of their policy ideas, and that comes in the form of their fight against casualised workforces, which has massive implications for our industry. Their crusade against temporary visa holders, which also has massive implications, and it could either go to one of two ways, or whether it benefits us or whether it hurts us. And the other thing I think is also just sort of looking at what the ACTU and the relevant unions, especially the SDA in South Australia, are looking for. And I think that if Labor had a majority, we would definitely need to be on their case very first week, as soon as if Mr. Albanese does get his knees underneath the desk at the lodge, we would immediately have to figure out what they were doing. And it's very hard for us to speculate what they would do, apart from those three things that I mentioned earlier, simply for the fact that they haven't posted anything really. So it does give us some concern, given the past history of other Labor governments. But, I think as 2019 showed us, expect the unexpected, really. In terms of other things that we're looking to fight, and I'll just cap it off here before I take up too much of my time, takeaway alcohol is something that we're still fighting for. It's something that we've been successful in New South Wales and Victoria in getting over the line. And I know that the current Minister for Family and Small Business, Andrew Michaels, who I mentioned earlier, was actually very receptive to that idea. And I think it's just a matter of us getting in front of her and discussing the nuts and bolts of it. And the two other things, apart from the staffing crisis that I mentioned earlier, was also we want to make sure that these close contact rules and other COVID restrictions are not coming back. We want to make sure that businesses are free and easy to do what they do best without the hindrances of the government sort of making it hard for you to do so. And finally, just keeping up that funding for small business that we've come to know and love through COVID-19, because I still think there's so much more that the government should be doing in terms of helping you guys get back on your feet and helping you guys make that next step into becoming not only a great destination for South Australians, but a fantastic destination for people from all over the world to come in and get you guys pumping and raring to go. So that's sort of what we're up to. That's the political space at the moment. If you have any questions, as Wes and Julia said, chuck it in the Q&A. But I'll also leave you my email if you have any other questions that you want to take offline. So thanks very much for that.
Thanks, Hugo. Very comprehensive. Thank you. Now, Ricky. Hello, welcome.
Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Julia, for the invite. Just a little bit about myself. Essentially, what my business does is we consult food manufacturers around innovation and concept development. We also have our own products and solutions, in particular for the hospitality industry. So similar to probably many of you, our business also faced significant challenges over COVID. Many things no longer worked, but some things worked, I guess, extremely well. The positive is that people had a lot more time to talk. So we really utilized the time in finding out a bit about what's happening in the market and, observing the changes, speaking to our customers. Specifically, one of our target markets is the cafe sector right across South Australia, Victoria, and New South Wales. I know not everyone's from that space, but I think there's some overarching themes that, may spark some thought. So I might share my screen if that's all right. So the first thing we noticed that across the sector, there seems to be some pretty clear distinctions between accounts, especially in the cafe industry. The first one in particular is what we call kind of non-specialty, right? And so we find a lot of venues in this space that are, I guess you could consider them generic. The business is largely based around convenience, and they're a lot more price sensitive. And we found that, this group of venue really suffered during this period. They're doing a little bit of everything. And, with some of those costs and things unfolding, a lot of them unfortunately have folded. The second group is where the majority of our customers sit. And this really typifies the Australian coffee culture. So think your local hipster joint that's, got 20 different milk options. Interestingly, many of these cafes, especially around the suburbs, actually did better as their customers really wanted to support them. Their customers valued things like decor, branding, social content, supporting local, and really were perceived as having, better quality of, offering. Although, they did better than the non-specialized in terms of our accounts, like most venues, they struggled and will probably continue to struggle with cost of goods, staff, rent, overheads. The last group that really we came across or that we've labeled is what we've called profitable. And these weren't necessarily the best cafes or the most trendiest cafes, but they had a real focus on, their customer experience and really understood their margins and their costs. They had a real strong focus on kind of finding new sales, especially over those lockdown periods, with things like introducing a small retail arm. So not just focusing on, instant consumption, but giving their customers an opportunity to take things home, take things to the office for later consumption. They had a much more higher focus on, local products, differentiating themselves from, mass produced products, telling the local story, and really leveraging things like delivery apps by, bundling and, introducing new ways of, essentially increasing their basket size. And a lot of these, accounts use the opportunity to acquire sites while, other cafes were really selling them at a dime. And I think this is something that's going to be continued. So on the back of this, we thought pretty deeply about how we can help kind of bridge this gap, really taking our customer base, which is in that specialty field, to, taking them to a more profitable model, or at least introducing concepts that aligned with that. And so one thing that we introduced over the period was this concept of custom branded food and beverage products for cafes. And the idea was to give cafes the opportunity to have, high quality products that they could sell for, higher margins, given the increased cost. The custom branding aspect would also allow them to kind of leverage, their existing brand and really encourage that initial trial and repeat purchase, again, with the added benefit of, promoting their own brand over someone else's or some, multinational's brand. We were quite particular in, selecting products that were on trend, that are profitable. As an example, one of our products is, organic cold pressed juices. And one of our main focus was to kind of reduce the risks in an uncertain climate. So our proposition, was customization without setup costs, minimum order quantities, and no contracts essentially. So, really happy to say, after 18 months, we're still around, and actually we're across hundreds of locations across Australia, on the back of this concept. The market really has taken, from what we've seen, the notion of, this custom branding, being more localized and, leveraging their own brand and their customer base, whether it be cups, napkins, which have been done for quite some time, to now taking it to things like their own branded products and, expanding into areas and sales which they traditionally wouldn't have had. So again, thank you guys for the opportunity to share some of our insights and, a little bit about our business. Again, if there's any questions for me in particular, feel free to get in touch. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ricky. If you wanted to maybe pop your email address into the chat box in case somebody has a query or would like to get in touch with you, please do. And now, Michael, good afternoon. Thank you. So Michael is Associate South Australian Sponsor from Wallmans Lawyers.
Thank you, Julia. Good afternoon, everybody. And certainly, good to be coming after those three discussions, I should say, which have an overly, I think, positive view on things, which is good to hear, because when the lawyer steps in the room, things tend to take a bit of a dive for the negative, but I'll try and keep things as positive and practical for you all as I can. So I've been asked to talk to you very briefly about state-based, South Australian specific, restaurant and catering specific IR and safety issues. And look, although as Wes said before, COVID, I think, is increasingly in the rearview mirror, thank heavens. Particularly in my space, we're still seeing the after effects of COVID, and that's in two ways. Firstly, not everybody did it. The government certainly didn't do it, but some venues did mandate vaccinations. And we're now coming out the other end of that in terms of do we keep COVID vaccinations mandated for visitors, for staff? If so, for how long? And look, there's no right or wrong answer on that. It is very much horses for courses, the size of your venue and what you do. For what it's worth, if you haven't taken many steps in this area, I would not worry. The point of this is that that discussion around mandating vaxxers is very much out the other side. But again, worth noting that that's something which, because of the controversies around it, did require a lot of advice and considered thought, particularly in the employment law and the safety space, because a lot of people forgot that the COVID mandates, when they applied government or business specific mandates, were very much about safety law and WHS and how far people had to go to protect their workplace, to protect their staff. So it was a really interesting period, kept people like me without sleep for a solid 6 months, but look, we're getting through there, and hopefully it won't happen again in our lifetimes, but if it does, we've got an increasing body of case law to give us a bit more guidance. The second COVID issue, which we're still seeing, and all of you will be, I've no doubt, of course, is the availability of staff as a result of the close contact isolation requirements. Now, thank goodness, as you would all know, last week here in SA, we finally dropped the more stringent 7-day requirements, and we're now consistent with our colleagues on the Eastern Seaboard. Now, my sense of clients I've spoken to, of course, is that it hasn't been a miracle overnight in terms of staff flooding back into the doors. But again, hopefully that's a bit of a watch this space in terms of, we come back to that safety risk. What should we do with our staff returning to work post close contact or post actual exposure? My advice, keep it simple, go with what the government is doing. Well, within reason, they're not perfect, but now we're coming out the other side. The government SA health guides should be a primary source of what to do. And like they've been suggesting, look, keep the contacts, let them return to work, but with safety measures. Could be things like masks, could be things like rat tests. But again, if you have any particular questions, let us know, because even things like rat testing staff that return who have caught it and want to return sooner, good in theory, but some of the things we've been helping people with, who pays for the rat? If the employer requires staff to, say, have a daily rat test on their return, and they haven't caught it, and they've run out of, say, government supplied rats, we come to those bits and pieces. But again, at the end of the day, it's come down to reasonableness. It's come down to doing what the government agrees is reasonable. And at the end of the day, your end goal has to be getting as many staff back on your roster as you can. And again, we're coming down the other side of that now, but worth noting that has been keeping us busy for a little while. One other thing I've been hearing on, particularly coming back to Hugo and particularly Wes's valid points before about costs going up, are inevitable, particularly in my space, the IR space. The Fair Work Commission decision's been mentioned. Us employment lawyers are actually passing around a bit of a betting pool in terms of what that will be. We don't know. That's up to Fair Work, who will decide in a couple of months. But I think Wes was spot on. If I had to pick a precise figure of what the wage increase will be, I think it'll be about 4%, but it easily could be as high as 5 or 6. What the Fair Work wage arm will be watching very closely what happens in the coming month for precisely that. So on that, I've been asked about non-traditional instruments, because in our sector, things like enterprise agreements aren't as common as they are in larger employers. These documents where they sit above the award, and they used to be seen as a bit of a unicorn in terms of providing flexibility and cost cutting. Unfortunately, that's not as much the case anymore, particularly if you're not a larger employer who can wear the significant compliance costs with having an enterprise agreement. Sometimes it's cheaper and not perfect, but better to focus on the underlying, say, restaurant industry modern award. So that's another thing we've been talking about too. What are the other options in terms of engagement, how we engage people? And on that, Three words for you moving forward, coming back to Hugo's point about particularly what the election means. And elections are always exciting for us IR employment law nerds. It can very much mean we get a lot of work or little over the coming government, particularly if the laws change. But look, I think the critical focus and being confident that Labor will get in, at the very least they've got in South Australia, two critical concepts: superannuation and wage theft. Now, you've probably heard the phrase wage theft before. Our South Australian government has flagged in a general sense that it could be coming. That's a state-specific law. Victoria has it. It could be coming here. That is something to very closely watch for obvious reasons. It escalates the normal importance of wage compliance with the risk of actually going to jail if it is extremely severe. Now, I don't want you all panicking. People hear that and go, heavens, I don't want to go to jail for an innocent payroll error. That's not what they're about. But it does reinforce for us just how important, particularly the state Labor government, are about that moving forward. On the super piece, and this comes back to the federal level, in which the ATO are involved, et cetera, the spotlight is on this more than ever. The ATO in the last 12 months have really ramped up superannuation, ensuring it's being paid properly and to the right people. I think that's probably the most important one. Increasingly, this concept of, I'll call somebody a contractor, give them an ABN, and I don't have to worry about things like super. That increasing misunderstanding, not in our sector, it's rife across all sectors, unfortunately is really starting to bite. The ATO and say, well, hang on, you owe that person super. So again, is it something to panic about? To the contrary, I think there's still a lot of time to go before these laws are implemented. We still have a very important election to occur at the federal sphere. But again, if I had a tip for you all, I guess in terms of where I think this employment law regulatory space will go, particularly in terms of the regulator's focus, it's going to be on that wage compliance and on super. And one last thing, if I may, and hopefully more of an interesting one than a clutch the pearls of panic point, is non-compete. And this is really interesting, I think, in that for sectors such as ours, this concept of having senior employees sign a non-compete, which restricts what they can do after employment, it's not something which has been common in our sector. It's more common in, say, areas like where that client relationship is fundamental. So you have lawyers, stockbrokers, financial planners. But increasingly, I'm having clients in our sector and hospitality broadly actually come to me and say, Michael, you know what? Our costs are going up. Our client/customer base is wavering more than ever. We really want to do what we can to protect our assets, to protect our menus, our cost structures, the secret herbs and spices, if you will. And look, this won't be for every restaurant, but it's worth noting that I've just found personally just that real increase in work around this non-compete space, but also clients who, if they do have a senior employee leave and they start up in competition and they are causing damage, people more and more are thinking about putting their hard-earned towards seeing what they can do about that, because again, restaurants are being kind of attacked in every direction. The last thing you need is somebody, inappropriately, of course, and against their lawful obligations to you, running off and acting in competition. So I think I was bang on 7 minutes. That's very good for a lawyer. Welcome any questions. I appreciate I've just gone through 6 months of work in 7 minutes, but like everybody else has said, questions welcomed in the Q&A, and appreciate you all having me.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. And if anyone does have any queries, like Ricky and Hugo, pop your email address into the chat room if anyone wanted to get in touch with you.
And Michael, too, you can put your email in the chat room. That way, if people have a lot of times on webinar, had COVID 6 weeks ago, and I still have a dry cough. A lot of times on webinars like this, people either have business-specific questions that they want to send directly to us, and that's totally fine. So you can send those through, or you might be afraid to ask your question, and you might not be confident in your question. That's totally fine. Also, you can send them to restandcat@rca.asn.au. And certainly Hugo will pop that in the chat, and they'll go to the right person within the organization. So if there are no questions, it means that everyone has done an amazing job at explaining what they had to explain today. We've had quite a decent turnout to this webinar, so I'm quite pleased. and we will leave it open for just a minute more for any questions. I'd like to know where Hugo is in the world that has such a beautiful background.
Mm.
And Ricky, is yours.
Sorry, Wes. Oh, sorry, Hugo. Just some information coming through from the Adelaide Economic Agency. Ben Kirshner, I believe, is also attending today's session, but he's just stating some information here that via the Adelaide Economic Development Agency and the City of Adelaide, they have currently got 25,000 times 30 in the market until, that would be the vouchers he's discussing, until the 1st of June. This is the third successful rollout of this type of program with the Adelaide City Council, and the vouchers are currently across 247 businesses participating in the Adelaide CBD. And to date, they have supported 600K spent, or that amount of money has been spent in participating venues, which is very encouraging when city councils do, I guess, projects that are involving specific areas. I know Adelaide City Council or the Adelaide area has suffered, I think, like most states, CBDs have suffered. But the agency is certainly doing great things there to get the participation back into the CBD. He's also mentioning that the 700,000 shopfront improvement grants under assessment at the moment, and they'll be covering 80% of the cost. So if anyone is from the CBD that is listening today, Adelaide CBD, please feel free to contact myself and I will guide you through to Ben at the Economic Agency. So thank you, Ben.
That's awesome. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Julia. So with no questions, we're going to wind up the South Australia webinar. And we very much appreciate everyone's attendance. And thank you so much, Julia, for setting this up. Julia is your membership executive for South Australia and certainly can help answer all of your questions. She'll also pop her email into the chat just before we go. Otherwise, it's julia@rca.asn.au. And if you have any further questions. But thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you, everybody.